Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Curious Neuron podcast. And as promised in the intro, I am here with Kristina Calder. Welcome, Dr. Kristina Calder.
Thanks for having me, Cindy. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. So, just to give everyone a bit of a backstory about this, we know each other. We've known each other. Well, we knew each other from a very long time ago. But I was doing my master's and you were doing your PhD, right? When we were studying at Queen's University.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had Tatiana here on the podcast, and now I have you, and it's just interesting how life happens where I'm reconnecting to those people that we connected, and I really loved spending time with you and playing. We played soccer. You played soccer too, right? On
Right.
the team.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know those little things, those little moments in life. But what's interesting is that we all came back to health somehow.
Yes.
Mental health, well-being, and supporting people with that. And you went specifically into, you want to help people or women specifically understand their health and well-being during the time when most people are not telling us what's going on. So how did you come into this area now? And I know you have an Instagram account, and we'll share that in the show notes. How did you get into this area?
Well, it's really lived experience, and I feel like a lot of people kind of get into it once they've gone through something, and then they want to share what they've learned. So for me personally, it was entering my 40s and all these changes that were happening, and I was just, what is going on? Personally for me, it was like I was at the time doing triathlon. So I was getting like, I found my muscle was kind of wasting away. I was really fatigued and tired. I wasn't recovering as well. I was getting all these injuries. So it kind of started in that area. And I started doing research because, again, my background is on neuromuscular physiology. And part of my doctorate thesis was looking at, muscle related injuries and what's going on at the neuromuscular level. So, of course, being like you, a scientist and loving research, I
Mm.
really started to dive into it. And it was a book that I read. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Stacy Sims and Celine Yeager, but they're really big in the women's space and exercise science in women in perimenopause. And so I read this book that a friend recommended to me, and it was just eye-opening. It was just talking about all these symptoms that were related to perimenopause. And I was like, I didn't know what it was at the time. Like I hadn't
Right.
heard of it, right? Like, we kind of remember maybe that our moms went through this phase in their life where, like, I remember my sister and I explained it as when like mom would go crazy is kind of what we'd say, right? Like she would just lose her, and it was just, that's kind of all I really knew about it. And I knew it happened when you turned around 50. So when I started noticing things in my 40s, I was just kind of, I thought I had 10 years till that phase. Um, so again, yeah, it was really like reading the book. It was called Next Level, that just opened me up to like all these different symptoms. And I was like checking all these boxes. And so I just kind of went down this journey of learning everything I possibly could, listening to all the podcasts, reading all the articles I could. And then it ended up me going kind of back to getting a coaching certification. So it was a year-long program to become a women's health coach in functional nutrition. And then I've specialized in perimenopause, menopause research. So I've taken some additional certifications in that area. And then, getting my personal training certification, kind of getting back into the space of women's health and more muscular, skeletal, and overall wellness, like holistic lifestyle.
I love that you're doing this. And honestly, like, so I'm 40, I'm going to be 42. I remember when I turned 40, it was like maybe a couple months after that, I started developing insomnia. And I spoke to a friend of mine. I was like, wow, something's going on. I didn't think I was stressed, but I was getting these really 1 week long insomnia stretches. And they were happening every month that I didn't realize. And then at one point, after like the eighth month of this happening, my friend was like, hold on a second. I just took a course on perimenopause, and it's possible that this is linked to it. And so I started taking notes, and I realized it was the week right before I was starting my period that I would get insomnia. And I spoke to my mom, I spoke to my mother-in-law, I spoke to some women in my life that for sure, like they're in their 60s. And I'm like, well, you went through this, so I'm going to go see you and seek some advice from you. And they were like, oh yeah, we didn't know anything about that. We didn't like, why didn't I was upset that they didn't why didn't they warn me about this? But they didn't know. And so they were looking for like signs. They were thinking like the menopause aspect was what they were waiting for, but nobody had explained perimenopause to them. So Can we understand a little bit more about what perimenopause is and like this the changes that you saw as well in your body? At what age does this start and what is happening? Why are we seeing these changes?
Yeah, like honestly, I feel like if you're in your 40s, you could be perimenopausal, right? And some
Yeah,
people start early as their late 30s. It's, our 40s are really this kind of pivotal time. There's what's happening biologically. So we have all these hormone shifts, and it's really interesting. If you look at like a chart of like your estrogen and your progesterone when you're going through puberty, they look pretty similar to what's happening at perimenopause. Like they're kind of all over
really?
the place. So
Right.
they're pretty consistent when we kind of reach our kind of 20s through kind of into our like mid 30s, and then they're kind of erratic again. So we've got these hormonal shifts that are happening, these big all over the place estrogen, progesterone. These fluctuations kind of cause a bit of havoc on our system. We also we start to see body composition changes too, right, kind of happening in our 40s. A lot of people say what used to work for me isn't working anymore if they're maybe trying to lose some weight that they've put on. Another big thing is, again, and it's kind of related to the body composition. There's these metabolic changes are happening. Some insulin sensitivity could be also happening. And it's related to, again, the declines in estrogen, and also our muscle mass is declining, right? And again, that's a big part of what I was studying. It was like muscle, and when people got injured, how you'd have atrophy, or, you talk about sarcopenia as you get older. So again, I never thought about women in their 40s, how much losing that muscle could be impacting all these factors. And the biggest thing too, if you think about our 40s, it's a huge kind of lifestyle things are happening. So again, for a lot of women, this is kind of when they're at the peak of their career, right? This is maybe when they're kind of making
Sure.
that senior level management position. So it's more stressful. So they're dealing with potentially more stress at work. However, their hormones all over the place. So they're not able to kind of it's almost like this perfect storm that's happening. And then add on top of that, and this is personally what happened to me, you have teenagers in the house. So not only are my hormones all over the place, but my teenage daughters are all over the place. So it's just this it's just yeah, and it's
Aren't
then
we lucky?
we are. And it's the sandwich generation, right? I don't know if you've heard
Yeah.
this term, but it's like we also then have our aging parents. So
Mhm.
not only am I worried about my parents, I'm stressed about what's going on in my career. Then I have my children. And again, nobody ever told me this. Like when your children are little, you kind of, you're worried about feeding them and making sure they get enough food and sleep properly and they make friends and all that. But then when they become these teenagers, it's this emotional, it's like this
Mm.
psychological world that I never even I didn't even
Yeah.
realize was coming my way, right? But it's
Right.
like it's constant. So again, it's perimenopause is typically in our 40s. Again, it could happen as early as 30. It could last like 5 to 10 years until you reach menopause. And like menopause is when you've had 12 consecutive months with no period. So once you've had no period
Mm.
for 12 months, then that's menopause. Like that day is you're in menopause. And then so everything
Got
after
it.
that is kind of post menopause.
Hmm. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So this perfect storm that we're in, maybe somebody's listening to this and says, "Well, okay, maybe I was already moody a little bit, or the rage happened to me, and that's part of what I always experienced." What are some signs and symptoms that we should be looking out for in terms of like, maybe this is perimenopause?
Yeah, so it is insane actually if you look at the symptom list. Like you think the typical, right? You're like you hear, okay, so perimenopause, menopause symptoms, it's hot flashes,
Yeah.
it's mood swings, right? And those are kind of like the biggest things you hear, maybe increased anxiety. Like, but there's numerous amount. Like it's kind of again when I read the book and I was like, oh my goodness, I have like all these things. So really and when I work with clients, the first thing, because they always say, how do I know? Can I take a blood test? I'm like, well, blood tests don't really tell you because the day you take the test, your hormones could be up or down. Like, again, they're all over the place. That kind of looking at your hormone levels isn't the greatest way to do it. And it's not recommended by a lot of doctors. So, step one is kind of like, do you have irregular periods? Like, are they shorter? Are they heavier? Are they like lighter? So, kind of start tracking. I always tell my clients to kind of track, and I kind of have a worksheet that I work with them to help this. And again, a lot of people now have like their Apple Watches or whatever they have to track a lot of how they're feeling. And so that's kind of the first sign is if your periods are changing. Hot flashes, night sweats. So that's another thing I experienced was more night sweats and my inability to handle wine. I used to be able to have a glass of wine and sleep no
Right.
problem.
Yeah.
That's things I started noticing in my early
Mhm.
40s. I couldn't. if I have wine now, I know I'm not going to sleep well, right? And
Yeah.
and again, it's I'm a data person, so then I have my aura ring. The next morning, I look at what's your HRV, and I can see that my parasympathetic sympathetic system is not working that great because of wine, right? So
Wow.
you see
Right.
that you're not able to handle that type of added
Mm,
stress. You kind of said the mood swing. So
mm.
like this is a big one is the increased anxiety and mood swings. So, and again, if you have these symptoms kind of when you're younger, the chances of them coming back full swing when you're in perimenopause is like the research shows it's like twofold, right? Like it's just like if you had it then, you're gonna get it now type thing.
Well, I'm happy that you said the anxiety part, right? Because it's not just mood swings. I know many people my age that experienced severe anxiety that came out of nowhere in their early 40s. Well, it felt like it came out of nowhere. So, from what you're saying, that is very possible. It's not about a mood swing at that point. It's about your mental health being affected.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, that's one thing that I experienced. So I never really
Mm,
had anxiety, and I would
mm,
notice we would be up at a cottage, and normally if my kids went out tubing, I would be like have fun, but I
mm.
was crippled with this fear, and all I could think about the whole tube ride was they were going to flip and another boat was going to come and kill them, right? Like it was just like,
Right.
and I could not enjoy myself, and it was just so there. I experienced a lot of kind of anxiety, like stuff that I never really had before. So that was another thing where I'm like, check, you know what I mean? I did get the bit of the weight gain around the midsection, which again kind of happens as well. And the other thing was joint pain. So it wasn't just like general joint pain injury, it was kind of over the whole body. And this was brought, Dr. Bonda Wright is someone who talks about this a lot. She's an orthopedic surgeon and she coined the term, I kind of forget the name of it right now. Again, another part
It's
of
okay. We can add
perimenopause is you,
it.
as you forget.
Yeah. We can add
Um,
in the show notes for everybody after.
yeah, yeah, but it's just this general like muscle pain. Like I would get up and I would feel like an 80-year-old person, like not being able to get out of bed. So just having this joint pain. And another big thing that women go through is just having, general decrease in their libido. Vaginal dryness is another a
Hmm.
thing that kind of happens. I also had like itchy ears, like really itchy ears. Like it was just like I
Really?
would be in, and so again, I kind of had my
Wow.
own journey. And then once I personally decided to go on HRT, and once I started estrogen, I'm lucky because it doesn't not everybody has the same reaction. A lot of people do though, but my joint pain went away. I don't have the itchy ears anymore. My mood has stabilized more. My
Mm,
anxiety's come down a bit. Like I feel like I'm kind of back to my old self.
mm.
Um, yeah, so those are kind of I think a lot of the main symptoms that you would hear about in perimenopause. Again, is just that general anxiety, mood swings, some
Mm.
night sweats, hot flashes, um, joint pain. Yeah.
It's a lot, and it doesn't mean that we're gonna get all of it, right? Because I think for myself, it was really just the insomnia that like came up, and I did have other little things here and there, but it wasn't. It's so hard, and I'm glad that you said to track it because as much as it's going to feel like work for us, it's actually going to help you understand what's happening to you a little bit better, right? That's only when I started noticing like when this insomnia was happening, and so I do think that it's important that we kind of come back to that and track the collect some data so that we understand what does it look like for us. You spoke about the anxiety, and like I said, so many women have experienced this. I want us to get like a little bit nerdy and go into this GABA-ergic system. You spoke about this on social media, and I think that it's really important for many parents to understand that. So what is GABA? What is the GABA-ergic system, and why do you think what should we know about that?
Yeah, so again, this is something that I kind of came across when I was doing a lot of the research because there's a researcher, I don't know if you've heard of her, Dr. Lisa Mosconi, and she's really big with women and brain health and what's happening during perimenopause, menopause. And so what she's finding in her research is that this decline in estrogen, it's having an effect in the brain. And so estrogen is known to be, it really kind of helps with our, I believe it's the inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it's that calming in the neural activity. So
Right.
that is what GABA does, right? Like
Yeah.
GABA is something that is in the brain and it acts as a neurotransmitter. So it is what is our calming. So if we have a decrease in estrogen, and estrogen is known to have a really profound influence on the GABA function, it does help regulate the production and the activity of GABA and the receptors. So if we don't have as much estrogen in there, we don't have the same calming effects, right? So that's, I think, one of the biggest thing that's coming out with her research is kind of looking at that relationship between the two. Um, so yeah, so during perimenopause, this fluctuation, it can really disrupt, that GABA system.
Well, it's so important to know this because sometimes there are things that just by knowing you feel a bit more normal, right? Like I think this is one of those things where knowing this is not going to change how you function tomorrow. However, knowing that this is happening in your brain, at least those thoughts that we have, those negative thoughts of like, what's wrong with me, right? Like, I hope that helps somebody who's listening because there are so many changes happening, and these changes are leading to you not having the same control over certain things like your emotions and mental health. And it's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And like I had this conversation actually with a client the other day because, we were talking about, kind of what's going on with her. And she was just saying, again, it was just all these things were happening in her life that were really stressful. And she was feeling, fatigued. And, she was saying that she had some symptoms of like thought her period was coming, like breast tenderness and all this stuff. And she wasn't able to handle a lot of what was going on in life. And I was like, you need to give yourself grace.
Yeah.
Like you're saying right now you have all these symptoms, so you're going to be getting your period soon, so
Mm,
so your hormones are all over the place, you're in perimenopause, you have to like allow people around you too, like your husband, and to be like, I right now am feeling this way, right? And I think it's really getting the support from your network and who's around you. And like I know I do that with my family. I mean, if sometimes I'm like, I'm just having a bit of a day. You know what I mean? I just need a bit of time. And they're fine with that. They hear me talk about it all the time. So,
right.
they're quite very much like, oh, mom needs her moment, right?
Yeah.
But I do think it is acknowledging it and knowing that what you're going through is because of these hormone changes. It's not because, you know what I mean, like you're losing there's a reason for it, right? And it's okay. We all go through it. We all go through it if we're lucky to go through it, right? If we're lucky to be around at this time. And once you get over that hump, like it is better on the other side. And this is what I've heard, right? So it's just kind of getting through this storm and yeah, and I think, as you say, it's getting it out there so people know what to expect,
Exactly.
and how to
Mm,
support themselves during this time as well, right?
exactly. So, how about we dig in a little bit into the diet aspect of this? Because I'm curious to know if going through these changes, all of these changes leads to us having to be a little bit more mindful of our diet. I see so much online in terms of like eat just beef, like eat a steak every day, 3 times a day, or vegetables are bad, or eat these vegetables, or only eat vegetables and eat this much. It's just, it's really overwhelming. And so I could only imagine people out there saying like, I don't even know what to, I don't want to eat anything anymore because everything's bad for me. And is that changing for me as a woman now that I'm in my 40s or going through perimenopause? So, what are some things that we should know? Some overall, general things when it comes to diet when we are going through these changes?
Yeah, like, absolutely. Like this is, I think, this one area, there's a lot of misinformation that is out there. And it makes me really angry because I do feel like a lot on social media that people are really targeting and taking advantage of women during this perimenopausal stage. They're trying to sell them like this, we can fix your menopause belly, or these are like all this stuff. I think with anything, and I always say this, like you're an N of one, right? Like we're all individual. What works for one person is not going to work for the other. So the biggest thing that I see, and when I work with my clients, it is protein. And you do hear this all the time, like protein, protein, protein. It's like a full-time job, I think, to try to eat enough protein. But if you think about it, as we age, as everyone ages, man or woman, we're losing our muscle mass. And the way to maintain our muscle mass is to eat enough protein and to work out, right? To strength train, right? So the one biggest thing I say whenever I'm working with any of my clients is honestly like, if we could do anything, let's have breakfast, right? Like we need to support our system. Like we wake up and with our cortisol levels, like we should eat breakfast. And making sure that we get around 30 to 40 grams of protein in that breakfast.
What does that mean or look like?
So I've done a few posts like this because a lot of people ask, like, how do you get that? And whether you do it without protein supplementation. So I do use whey protein. I do find it's just an easy way to do it. So I every morning I have the same thing. I'm pretty boring. I have my oatmeal because it's got my, healthy carbs and my fiber. I put a scoop of my protein powder in it. I also add some Greek yogurt, which is high in protein. So again, some people could just have a big bowl of Greek yogurt with some fresh fruit and nuts and stuff like that. That's another great way to do it. And yeah, I always throw berries on it, like blueberries, raspberries. And to get magnesium and like the healthy fats. I love pumpkin seeds. So roasted pumpkin seeds, I always throw in it. So I have this bowl every morning and it's got around 50 grams of protein in it, right? So the one good thing about it too is it helps keeps you satiated. So that's another big factor with protein is it's like there's a lot of benefits to it. And again with women, and I find busy women is a lot of people skip meals, right? And because they're busy, they're running around. There's a lot that's going on. And so again, working with people, I always try to say having a meal every 3 to 4 hours. So really trying to have that breakfast, lunch, and dinner at least. And with in each of those, trying to get around, 30 to 40 grams of protein is really it's something that I think is really important. That and the fiber. So getting enough fiber.
Which we don't, right? I've only recently become aware of fiber. I've been trying to be more mindful of what I eat. I was getting the protein. I have my bowl of Greek yogurt beside me I was having before we started chatting. That's an easy part for me. But the fiber, I've noticed I don't have a lot. How can we be more mindful about fiber? Because I've noticed that when I'm more conscious of bringing more into my diet, that I feel better. I don't know what changes, but I just feel better.
Yeah, well, it's because again, our gut microbiome, as we age, our system's aging. So things are changing. You know what I mean? Like what you might have been able to use to eat before and your stomach could handle, you can't anymore. So there is a lot that's going. So it's supporting all that stuff. So like again, anything that's high in fiber or like a lot of your leafy greens, a lot of lentils are higher in fiber. I know some people that supplement. So whether they take, like my parents did this all the time, they still do Metamucil, right? Like doing like
Right?
stuff
Yeah.
like that to kind of help get the fiber up. So I like tracking, and a lot of times with people, I'll say just do it for a few days. Like I know it's a lot, but even if you do it for a few days, like use something like MyFitnessPal and just scan the barcodes, measure stuff, know what you're putting in, just to have an idea of how much protein are you actually getting and how much fiber, right? Because it would tell you that. Because a lot of people I talk to, I'm like, they're like, "Oh no, I have a healthy diet. I get tons of protein." I'm like, "Okay, like tell me like what's your what's your breakfast like?" They're like, "Oh, I have like 2 eggs and this and that." I'm like, "Okay, 2 eggs, that's almost like 14 grams of protein. That's not enough." I'm like, again, they don't a lot of times I just say trying to get what your ideal weight is. So for me, let's say my ideal weight's around 160 pounds. I should be eating around 160 grams of protein, which is a lot, right?
In a day, that's your total.
In a day. Yes.
Wow. Okay. And I know somebody who's listening to this might even feel uncomfortable at some point hearing this because I think like the go-to when we were younger or growing up, it's like I'm gonna skip breakfast. I want to lose weight. I want to, and but you're saying eat breakfast. I need the protein. I need a lot of protein. But in the end, we're trying to build muscles. It's not about the weight anymore, right? We need to let that go maybe and focus on, I don't know, maybe change our shift our thinking around that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the change the shift. And that's kind of where I come up with my company name because a lot of shifts are happening with our hormonal shift, right? And it's a lot of women I find aren't eating enough. So that's the first thing too. Like they're not even getting what their basic metabolic rate is, like what they just need to function as a person just sitting all day, right? Like a lot of people are just cutting the calories so aggressively that they're putting on more weight. Like it's working against them. It causes even more fatigue.
That can happen.
It can happen. And honestly that is kind of what happened with me because I was training for these triathlons. So I was eating, let's say around for me at the time it was like 1800 calories a day, which some people may be like, "Oh, that's a lot," but not with the training I was doing because I was doing 2 a days, right? So it just caused me to get more fatigued, more injured. I was putting on weight, right? Which again was like the opposite of what you think would happen if you were in this caloric deficit and you were doing all this activity. So I think that the biggest shift that needs to happen is a lot of women think cut their calories, cardio, 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 do
Right.
fasting, skip breakfasts,
Yeah.
right? And I looked into fasting and I read a few books about it. But the more I've heard people talk about it. I really like Peter Attia. I follow him a lot. It's kind of like, in the end, what is your goal? And my goal, and a lot of people's goal, should be to maintain their muscle mass. Because again, the more muscle you have, the higher your metabolic rate is. So, you know what I mean? The more you can keep a healthy body composition. So if I'm skipping breakfast, then that could be impacting my muscle mass. I might be losing it because I'm not getting in enough calories and I'm not getting enough protein, right? So again, it really comes down to kind of what your goals are. And it again, I work very kind of individually with each person I work with to kind of be like, well, what are your goals? Like, are your goals to have body composition changes? Is it to put more muscle on? Is it to like where do you see yourself in the year for your health? Like, where do you want to get? And a lot of times it is that shift of, okay, you need to eat more. You know, you've stopped doing all
Mm.
this cardio. You need to give yourself rest, right? A lot of people think
Yeah.
they have to work out every day, and no, your
Mhm.
body
Mhm.
needs rest, especially in perimenopause when you're not sleeping, you have this heightened cortisol. There's just a lot of factors that come into play, and they're all individual. And you got to look at, yeah, people individually and kind of what's best for them in their current state and what's going on in their lives.
I'm so happy that you're bringing all these points up because I know they're parts of discussions that I've had with people, and there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation out there, right? If we can dig a little bit deeper into the workouts, I think it's really important to understand. You mentioned, muscle and our resting metabolic rate. So for those who might not understand what that means, this is like the energy, right, that our body is spending by just sitting.
Yes. Yeah, just functioning. Yeah.
Exactly, just functioning. So not even thinking about working out, but just sitting down. The more muscle we have, the more energy our body is using, right? In simple terms.
Yeah.
And this is why, it's really important to kind of understand this, because I've had discussions with older, like, women in my life that are in their 60s, and there's this misunderstanding of, like, I don't want to have big muscles. Right?
Yeah.
And so they do the cardio, they walk for 3 hours a day, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but
Yeah.
I don't think they're supplementing it with the intake for calories, right? The food and the protein.
Hmm.
And so this, again, that's why I even said, like, we have to shift that sort of idea of, like, less calories, more workout, more cardio and all of that,
Yeah.
because I think we are stuck. Even for myself, it's almost like we've been told that so often that it's really hard to disconnect or disassociate from that and say, no, I need to work out. I need to lift weights, heavy weights, not just 5 pounders.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
You're right. It's like and I have this conversation all the time with women, and they're just like, well, I don't want to get bulky. Like, I don't want to lift heavy weights because I don't want to get bulky. And I'm like, you're not. Do you know how hard it is to put muscle on? Like, it is hard. Like, I train 4 or 5 times a week to try to put muscle on. You know what I mean? Like, and I do have muscle, but I've been doing this for years, but I'm still not bulky. So it is that education. It's around letting women know that lifting heavy weights is not going to make them bulky. Like, a lot of times when you ask them what they want, they're like, well, I want to be stronger. Okay, well, what does strong look to you? Well, I want to feel toned. I want to be able to lift and do all these things. I'm like, okay, then that's weight training. Like, you need to do resistance training. You're not going to feel strong by being running on a treadmill 5 days a week. You know what I mean? Like, that's great for your cardio, which you need, but yeah. So again, it comes down to, the two biggest things I think with health and like health span is, you know, your strength, so your muscular strength, and like grip strength and your VO2 max are the two big kind of predictors of health span. And so with those two variables is strength training for grip strength, and then VO2 max, so your cardio ability to, take in and utilize oxygen, is your cardio. So they're both important. So
Right.
a lot of times with my clients, it's kind of, again, it's personalized. Like, how often can you get in a workout, right? Based on their life and their lifestyle. So really the minimum level I would say is 2 times a week of trying to do weight training. So
Okay.
and if it's 2 times a week, then just do 2 full body days, right? And kind of what does that look like? So for some people it would be like it's the main movement, so it's the main compound movements like the squat, the hinge, the push, the pull, and then you kind of do these accessory movements to help with that. So you only need to spend like 20-30 minutes sometimes doing these workouts, but lifting heavy so what that would mean is, let's say I tell you to lift something 5 times. If you lift it 5 times and at the end I'm like, okay, like, do you feel like you could have done a couple more, or could you've done another 510? And if you say another 510, well, that's not heavy enough, right? Like, you almost want to lift where you could maybe have only done 2 or 3 more, and that's called reps in reserve. So lifting heavy is getting to the point where you're almost tapped out. And I see this a lot at the gym. I'll be at the gym and I'll see women on equipment, and once they leave, I'll go on the equipment and I'm like, they might have only been doing like 5 pounds. I'm like, again, it's great that they're there. It's great that they're at the gym and they're moving their body, but they could be so much more efficient with their time, right? If they just kind
Yeah.
of knew to just push themselves a little bit more. They're not gonna become this bulky
Bulky.
person.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's something called progressive overload. So it's kind of like if you, for example, go to the gym today and let's say you're 20 pounds you're benching, and you do that, let's say 3 sets of 5. Um, and at the end, you're feeling pretty good. You've got that 2 to 3 reps in reserve. So progressive overload means the next time you go to the gym, you go either a little bit higher in your weight or a little bit more in your reps. So again, you're progressing, right? And so every week you see this increase. And because you need to put the stress on your body to get a response. And so a lot of people might just go and keep doing the same thing over and over again, but well, you're not going to get stronger. Yes, you're building the neural networks, you're maybe becoming more efficient and proficient at the
Mm.
movement, but are you actually getting stronger, right? So increasing that weight or increasing that resistance. So a lot of people just need a bit of education around that. And that's why I always recommend whether you talk to a personal trainer, um, at the gym, there's a lot of great kind of free kind of YouTube apps you can even kind of use as well if people want to do home-based workouts. But yeah, 2 times a week minimum doing resistance training, I think is key. And then doing other activities that support you, right? So my big thing is a lot of kind of the mental health and kind of what's going on with anxiety and mood. So I'm a very much outdoor person. You can probably see on my Instagram, I'm always like get outside is my hashtag. It's just a big stress relief. And even if I like someone's like, oh, I don't really like to walk. I'm like, just go to your end of your driveway one day. If you're feeling, just go outside into your driveway and back. Maybe the next day you'll maybe walk to the end of your road, right? Like it's just a starting point for some people. But trying to get that 10,000 steps a day is another
Mm.
kind of big thing.
It's so
Um,
hard sometimes, though.
yeah.
I know that as parents, like it can be hard, and but we have to find ways to prioritize it. But
Yeah.
it is challenging for a lot of parents.
Yeah. And, I had this thought the other day. I was at the park or walking by the park, and there was a mother with a baby and a baby bajorn, and she was pushing a stroller. And, it brings me back to the days. And that was me with like when I
Mm.
was out with the kids. And I'm like, this is what happens with women in midlife when their children are older. Like I used to be hoisting, a 20-pound baby and pushing the stroller. So I was essentially weight training, right? If you think about it,
Right?
like carrying this load or
It's
carrying
true.
these bucket seats, I'm not doing that anymore, right?
Yeah.
So again, this is when you see a lot of changes happening at perimenopause
Mm.
because you're not as active as you used to be,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Unless you are being intentional about it. So,
Mm.
that's another big thing I think to think about too is we really do have to kind of be intentional with our working out and training and taking
Mm.
care of our body physically and mentally at this time.
And, what sort of advice would you give somebody who says, well, I haven't done this in a long time. I have kids now that are like, maybe preteens or a little bit older. So I do think I have time, but where do I begin? I know you said the 2 times per week. I want to also bring up like the idea of like, it's not an all or none thing, right? Like you don't have to do 7 days a week, 2 hours a day. Because I know that some of us might go towards the extreme. Well, if 2 days is good, then I'm assuming 7 days is even better, right? But what's the word, like a not a plateau, but at some point there's no more returning. I don't know why I can't remember the word right now, like there's no return to your investment, right? If you're working out and muscle training 7 days a week.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to rest. Like again, there's a like during this time, your body needs to rest, right? Like if you're putting strain or stress on your muscle, it needs recovery time. That's how when it gets stronger, right? So, again, when talking with again, it's individually. So it's like if you're saying a person's coming like I haven't done this in a while, what do I do? It's kind of like, well, what do you enjoy doing? Like it's kind of trying to figure out because you don't want to make it hard for them. If they're already busy and life's busy and like they have a lot going on, it's kind of like, well, what have you done or what have you done in the past that you used to enjoy? Like, you know what I mean? Like find something that's easy. So if they're like, you know what, I used to love going to the gym or I have weights in the
Tennis or
basement or yeah,
sure,
like
yeah.
just something like
Yeah.
just start with one habit, maybe just one thing they could do that's making them be a bit more active and getting into this kind of routine because they'll realize how it makes them feel good, right? And it's so again, it depends on the person's time and what's available and you know what you think they're actually going to do because it is a tricky time. There's a lot going on. We're really busy at this time, so it's
Yeah.
kind of finding what will fit in your life and not add an extra stress, right? Like you don't want to
Exactly.
add that extra thing to do. So
Mm.
again, if it's only 2 times a week, that's great. If you could do 4 times, that's great. Like that's good. Like 4 times, I
Yeah.
would say is like that's it, max that. Like you know what I mean, and then you could get really fun with your workouts, doing kind of more like split type workouts. So one day you focus just on upper body, the next day lower body, right? Versus
Mm.
like a full body or and then there's this whole research out there around HIT or sit training, which is a way to again help our cardiovascular system. So it'd be something like if you're walking on a treadmill, you're just walking at an easy pace, you know, you can have a conversation, you're kind of zone two. And then all of a sudden you just increase it where you're kind of out of breath for 30 seconds, like a sprint, and then you go back down for another 4 minutes. Like if you can add stuff like that into
Mm.
some of your, or even walking on the street, like you see a light post, all of a sudden walk really fast to the next light post. Like it's kind of like an interval training, right? It's another way to kind of, so there you can play around with it just by doing your simple walking around the neighborhood, add some variation to what you're doing to increase, you know, your VO2 max. And I'm a big proponent of wearing weighted vests. So I have a lot of my friends now, like a lot of people in the neighborhood are all wearing weighted vests. Again, it's just something you can do that can help with your muscle and bone health and your overall health.
And I love what you're kind of saying is like just see what works for you. There's no like set formula. It's just about moving your body and finding a routine that works best for you. And before you alluded to the fact that it doesn't even have to be an hour. You said 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes, right? And
Yeah.
there so it's possible for us to fit that in. And everything that you're talking about for me, from my background now, it's I think about mental health. Like when we feel like we're stressed and we're just kind of like keeping the stress inside our bodies. But when we work out and we exercise and move our body, we mobilize that stress. We feel better after. I just think of the mornings. I prefer working out in the morning before the kids wake up, and I do it from home. And there's so much on YouTube that you can follow, and it's simple to do. But the days that I don't do that, I'm not my best self. Like in terms of emotions, it's harder to cope. So I do think it's important for us to get in some sort of routine of whatever works best for you, but finding that routine because it's not only that you're going to notice your physical health feel better, but your mental health is going to feel better too.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like exactly what you just said. Like you've identified what works for you, right? And then it's around having boundaries. Like that is your time, right? And it's kind of like and you let your husband know that. And you know what I mean? Like it's just like my
Mm.
husband knows if I don't get exercise in, I'm going to be miserable, right? So it's very much like mom needs to go for her bike ride, or you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just it's
Mm-hmm.
something, it's a non-negotiable with me
Mm.
and because I know how much it impacts me positively when I do get out for whatever
Right,
I need to
exactly.
do. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
I love that. Another thing that I see a lot online and that it's really difficult to know what's best is these supplements or
Mhm.
shakes or, and you mentioned whey protein. And so I have whey protein and it's funny because maybe 2 months ago, somebody who does weight training in my family reached out to me and said, stop it, just stop the whey protein. I was like, okay, but now what do I do? And they're like, eat like 5 eggs instead of like 2 eggs and your protein
Yeah.
shake or whatever it is. And I was like, I'm just so confused. And so what does the research say, or what do you know in terms of, or what can you share with us really in terms of like what can we do to supplement because we're working out? Do we take what's the other one I hear a lot about? Um with a C.
Oh,
Mm,
creatine.
creatine. Like
Yes.
what are all these things and do we need them?
Yeah. So I think the big thing with supplements is to really understand that's the name. It's a supplement, right? Like it's like, so you should really try to have a solid foundation with your nutrition and your exercise and your sleep. And
Mm,
then supplements are then used to help if that needs to be helped in those areas. So with respect to protein, yes, it's better to get it from the real source, but if you can't, like for whatever reason, then supplementing with whey protein, you know what I mean? Like it's just like I will have my one scoop a day and that's what I do. Some days I might not because I can get it through other ways, but I'm not having like that and protein, but like I'm not having a bunch of that kind of that bad stuff, but you know what I mean? I've heard a lot of kind of exercise physiologists, nutritionists talk about, it is okay to supplement it with whey protein. It's been researched. I think it's a safe way to kind of get in that extra protein if you need to. There's so much research around creatine. So I do take a 5 milligram scoop every morning. I put it in my water. Like I have it in, I always have it in like my water and with a little bit of electrolytes. And there's a lot of research out there about how it does really help with muscle performance if you are strength training and also brain. And that's one thing I've actually noticed is, I did have a bit of kind of brain fog and stuff like that. And I have noticed that the creatine has helped. And again, I don't like taking supplements, so I really researched it and there's a lot of support and it keeps coming out about it being beneficial. So I do think creatine is a great thing to have as a daily dose in your water. Um, the other
what is
one's
it? What is
creatine.
creatine? Yeah, what is it helping
So
with?
creatine is something that is naturally in our muscles. And so my understanding of what creatine actually is it kind of just helps with, kind of muscle contraction. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I
Okay.
think that,
Yeah, I was just
yeah,
curious. Yeah.
because we have it stored naturally in our muscle. So
Hmm.
I think it is more around kind of the muscle contraction part of it.
Hmm.
But the whole brain thing, that's a new area. Like I didn't know that it could help with that, but
I'm
there is all
curious
this
now.
research supporting. Yeah.
I'm gonna dig
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah. Dig
I'm really
into
curious.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what about like vitamins or minerals? You mentioned the electrolytes in your water. I started doing that as well.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody's hearing this for the first time. Why are we hearing about electrolytes all of a sudden now?
Well, and this is another thing that that I learned with kind of just learning as I've been doing
Yeah.
is like if you just have plain water, it's not actually being really absorbed, right? Like you need to have that osmosis. Like you have to have either whether it be a little bit of salt or like something in your plain water for it to actually get into your cells.
Hmm.
So for me, just putting like I have put a little scoop of like electrolyte in my water just again to help with that process, right? To help with hydration. Because if you're just having plain water with nothing else, you're not really hydrating yourself that great. But if you have water with like when you're eating food, you obviously in your food you've got salts and all these other things that will help it pass. Um, so yeah, so that's a big reason why I have electrolytes. It's because I do typically work out every day, right? So I am kind of replenishing that. And it's another thing that happens actually in perimenopause and menopause. We're not as thirsty.
Hmm.
Like we kind of that thirst.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's a big thing with my again clients. I'm like, make sure you're drinking enough water because you might not feel thirsty, but you still need to make sure you're drinking enough. Another big thing you might hear is magnesium. So people who again have issues with sleep, they would say try having magnesium and see if that helps. And it could go either way. I've had some clients that felt that it actually made it worse for them. So then I would recommend not maybe taking it right before bed, but maybe a little bit earlier, like kind of play around with it because again, everyone's a little bit different. But it's the magnesium glycinate is kind of good for that. And I don't know if you tried that too when you were kind of having a bit of the insomnia.
I did. It stopped my insomnia.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it literally stopped. When I started taking it, it stopped the insomnia that I had. I'll have like about like one like night every once in a while, but it stopped because I would have 3 nights straight that week, and that was hard. But yeah, I take magnesium now. What else is there that maybe we should know about?
So omega 3s are big. So
Mm,
I mean, so that's one thing that, my doctor kind of always says to me is like the biggest thing is again, omega 3s and again, why are they important? So it's really good for brain health. And it's also for the inflammation, right? And because again, I was having a lot of kind of joint pain and I'm very active and I kind of have this knee injury that does get inflamed. So I take the omega 3s specifically for that. Um, and then vitamin D, again, living in Canada, you hear that all the time, and you can get your vitamin D
mhm,
level tested. And, mine's pretty decent considering I wasn't supplementing with it, but because I'm outside so much, I think.
mm.
And I love the sun. I'm a bit of a sun baby, but yeah, vitamin D. So like the only supplements I really take, well, I kind of take those now. I take
Mm,
creatine, I take omega 3s, I take my vitamin D. My sleep's pretty good and I eat so many pumpkin seeds. I get a lot of magnesium between that and like my spinach and stuff like that that
mm,
I don't take magnesium, but my sleep's really good now. So
right.
um yeah, it really and then there are some women that take different types of adaptogens during perimenopause too to deal with their symptoms if they don't want to try hormone therapy. The big ones that are kind of talked about is ashwagandha is one. I don't know if you've heard about that one. I've never tried it.
I have, but maybe somebody hasn't heard about that.
Yeah, like ashwagandha, there's rhodiola. Those are kind of the two big ones, and they're supposed to help kind of with your stress resilience or energy levels and kind of some cortisol regulation. So, there is research around that it can help with that. So I think a lot of people who might have some type of like chronic stress or fatigue type thing could benefit from it. Um, and a lot of people will try these things like adaptogens before they maybe go on to hormone therapy, right? It's kind of trying what can you supplement or do naturally. Like again, if you've tried to get a really good like sleep routine and you've done everything you can, but you still can't sleep, then maybe, then you try magnesium or you eat magnesium rich foods, right? And then if that's not working, then maybe you can try, taking something like an adaptogen to see if that can help with sleep. And if that doesn't help, then maybe then you go to hormone, right? Like it's kind of like there's so many tools I think in a toolbox that a person can use, and it's just trying out and seeing what works for you. Because again, what might work for someone might not work for someone else, right?
Right. And I know that somebody listening to this might say like, wow, that's a lot of testing on myself, right? Like that N of one, there's a lot of work there, right? In terms of like the right diet, the right amount of exercise, but it really makes a difference in terms of getting to know what you need. Like you said, maybe increasing just the foods that are rich in magnesium will help you, in terms of your insomnia, but maybe that's not enough. And so you move on to the next. It just really is important. I want to kind of, I want to be mindful of our time, but also I still had so much to ask you. So first, I wanted to touch on heart health because you did mention this on social media.
Yeah.
What do we need to be mindful of when it comes to our heart too? Because you talked about changes that are happening to our body that might impact our heart health.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is something that again I learned kind of with the research. And like heart disease is the number one killer in women, right? And then again, I didn't like a lot of times it's other things that are kind of I guess more out of the media, but I didn't really know that heart disease was the number one killer.
I did not
So
know.
that was yeah, me neither, right? So that
Yeah,
was kind of the biggest one. And then the other thing that I learned about is that how estrogen plays a really protective role of your cardiovascular health. So when we have these decreasing levels of estrogen that are happening in perimenopause, this is now where we see changes. So a lot of people will talk about their blood pressures getting higher during perimenopause. They have the higher that LDL, so the bad cholesterol. They might have lower in the HDL, so the good cholesterol. It's also a time where you can have an increased buildup of plaque that's happening. So again, like during peri and menopause, it's a higher likelihood for women to have heart attacks and strokes and metabolic like it's kind of like this is a time that changes are happening because we've lost the protective mechanism of the estrogen. And the one thing that I found really interesting was that and I had friends, I don't know if you did or know some women that when they were pregnant, they might have had gestational
right.
hypertension, or
Mm-hmm.
they could have had preeclampsia or gestational diabetes. Like
Mm-hmm.
those are all almost pre-markers. Like if you had those when you were pregnant, the chances of you having like kind of issues with your heart going through menopause, you're at higher risk, right? So
Wow.
again, I didn't know this. So and a
No.
lot of women I don't think know this because
Mm-mm.
they kind of treat you at the time when you're pregnant, but then that they don't follow up after. Like it gets.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to cardiologists talk about how it should be those women should be followed and it should be monitored, right? Because if that stress on their body of being pregnant caused these issues in their system with their heart or blood pressure, etc., then we should track them and see what's going to happen
Exactly.
at perimenopause. So honestly, with the heart health, and it was February too, right? So that's why I'm talking a lot about
Mm-hmm.
heart health. But it's just like having regular annual checkups, looking at what your blood is, doing those, looking at your blood pressure, right? You can easily go into any Shoppers Drug Mart and sit in one of those machines and just have an idea of what's going on with your blood pressure, right? Yeah. So I think those are the biggest things. So, kind of knowing what your lipid panels are, looking at like your glucose A1C.
As you were talking, I was saying to myself, I need to book an appointment with my doctor. I can't remember the last time I had a blood test, but it's important. And you just reminded me why we need to look into that.
Yeah. I do it
Yeah.
every birthday. It's like, because my birthday's in
Is it?
January. So every January, like I love it that it is the beginning of the year. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
new year, here we
Yeah.
go.
Let's
Like,
see.
let's do all the testing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and this is now like I just turned 49, right? So this is my last year in my
Mm.
40s. So like my goal is to be in the best shape of my life when I'm 50. So like I've got all my blood markers, I've got everything. I know I did a VO2 max test. Like I have all these goals. So then when I redo it in a year, like I just want to be
Right.
that much better, right? Like, yeah,
That's so good.
it's important.
It really is. I think to close off our conversation, maybe this is a good segue talking about like the doctors, right? At what point do we say I need to explore other options? Magnesium in supplements aren't working. I've tried everything here, and my not just mood, my anxiety is high, my body's in pain. I'm not doing well. I'm not functioning properly, and I want to kind of add to this, that not all doctors might be as educated as we think, and to kind of be your own advocate. The reason why I'm saying that is because when I was going through the really severe insomnia, again, three nights straight, was a common thing for me every single month. And I went to the doctors, and he said, "Here's a sleeping pill. Take a little bit every month, and whenever it happens, and you'll be fine." And I said, "Well, don't you want to ask why or what's going on, or aren't there any other follow-up questions to me telling you I have insomnia besides that?" And so I really felt frustrated by our system. It's not everybody. I work with doctors, and we have like collaborations with clinics through Kirsteron, and I know that they're not all like that. But when it comes to perimenopause and menopause, I feel like we have to be even more of our own advocate and stand up for ourselves, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And like, this is honestly, I think it's a big issue right now. And you know, I'm lucky that my doctor is someone who is my age and well educated and up on top of all this. And you know, when I went in with my concerns, you know, I brought in like my book and I had it all like paid flag to like all the like these are the symptoms I have. These is and then this is and I tried this and I had laid it all out and I'm like, and I was waiting for her to say no because this is all I've heard about like whether you're gaslit, where they're like, oh, it's just part of aging. Deal with it, right? Like, and I've had friends who have gone through that. I was lucky that my doctor did not. She was very much like, 100%, let's put you on whatever, you know what I mean? Like, she was fine with it. So my advice a lot of times, like if you've done everything you can, you've have this checklist, like go in with the questions that you want to ask, like, you know, and if there's places like I know in Burlington where I live, if a doctor's not listening to them, then I could send them to other like a there's a place where they're NAM certified, so North American Menopause Society. So they're
Huh,
pharmacists. So you can
right.
book a consult with them and they could prescribe you certain things
Mm,
too, right? Or they at least can write out something for your doctor. Like if your doctors,
hmm.
a lot of doctors are scared and they because of what happened in the WHI study, you know, there was a scare about, you know, estrogen and it's linked to breast cancer. And so it kind of
Mm,
caused this big scare factor about women taking hormone therapy.
mm,
And again, it's like I do feel like it's out there more. A lot more people are becoming educated. A lot of doctors are not a lot. Some
mm,
doctors are taking the time to kind of re-educate themselves. But there are, and I've noticed this on social media, there's a lot of private clinics that are being opened up. There's a lot of doctors kind of going more into that you have to pay for it. It's not going to be
yeah.
covered, but there are women's health centers now that you can go to. And I think be
Mm,
heard, right? And you will be talking to people who specialize in this area and will support you for what you need if
yeah.
your doctor's not. But again, that's a huge barrier because some people might not
Yeah.
be able to afford that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
At least the
it's,
education piece, and keep bringing it up. And hopefully with the conversation that we had today, it offers everybody some sort of foundation of where to begin. Try with the exercise, monitoring, data
yeah,
collecting, for yourself. I think we've covered so much that I'm hoping somebody can say, like, I can start with this. And then, if I see, for mental health, we always say, like, when you're not functioning. So I'm assuming it's similar to this point, right? Where you're losing a lot of time. You're not going to work as much. You're taking a lot of sick days. You're not well. You're not yourself with your family. I would assume that's like the kind of flag that you want to look for in terms of, like, you really need to ask for help. But everybody will experience the symptoms very differently, right? There's a range of how severe or how many of them. So just being aware of that, I'm assuming, will at least help you with the next steps.
yeah, yeah. And burnouts, like burnout is a huge thing that happens with women at this age because of, again, everything that's happened. I know that you've had people on talking about burnout before. So that would obviously be good for people to go back and kind of listen to that as well. But yeah, there's a lot going on, but there is also a lot of help support. And I think the more that we talk about it and the more we educate ourselves about it and everyone just taking a small step that might help them move in the right direction. So again, whether that's just walking out the front door, getting some fresh air, doing some deep breaths, that might be enough to help you. It doesn't have to be a 5K weighted vest walk, right?
No.
Like it just could be some simple steps to just kind of,
Right.
yeah, supporting yourself with nutrition, eating enough,
Mm,
getting enough protein, um,
mm.
and rest and sleep.
Rest.
It's so much
Yeah, that's
important.
part
Getting
of
good
it.
sleep. Yeah.
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 Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Where can we learn from you? I'm going to put everything you talk about in the show notes. You mentioned some books. You have an Instagram account. What is it? And is there any other way that we can continue learning from you?
Yeah. So the best would probably be looking at my Instagram account. I'm pretty active on that. So that's at Dr. Kristina Calder. So which again you'll put in the show notes. I also do have a website that I post the odd blog on there, but my Instagram is probably the place that you can find me the most for sure. Yeah.
And the people you mentioned that you work with, is that only locally or is that also online?
So that's online. So I do both kind of, it's mostly via Zoom. But if you are in my area, then obviously there could be more kind of one-on-one touch sessions and training sessions in person. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks again. I really appreciate
Me too, Cindy. It was great to see you and talk to you.
See ya. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.